Hey everybody, it's Abishur Prakash, aka Mr. Geopolitics. In this episode of Predictable versus Unpredictable, we'll be looking at the new proposal by ASEAN to create a nuclear-free zone in Southeast Asia where the world's nuclear powers, from the US to China to Russia to France, pledge not to use or move nuclear weapons through Southeast Asia. Southeast Asia's bold proposal to effectively ban the use or movement of nuclear weapons throughout the region was predictable. It was predictable for several reasons, the biggest being that there is growing fears that the next war after Europe, after the Middle East, will be in Asia, particularly over Taiwan or second on the Korean Peninsula. And both of these conflicts draw in nuclear powers. North Korea is a nuclear power, and a fight over Taiwan will cause China and America to clash. Southeast Asia does not want to open the door to the wars going sideways with no guardrails. Southeast Asia is trying to limit, to impose parameters, sensing that the probability of a conflict is rapidly rising. Alongside this is that regions around the world, like Southeast Asia, are looking for opportunities to lead. They're looking for opportunities to redefine their power and role in the world. Just as China has been trying to transition away from cheap manufacturing to a high-tech economy for the past 15 years, so too Southeast Asia is trying to shift from being just another source of cheap manufacturing, being a destination for outsourcing, to being major players in the new era of geopolitics. And lastly is that the propensity for nuclear war is rising. The world is entering an era of nuclear proliferation, not non-nuclear proliferation. The door has swung open to nations pursuing and developing nuclear weapons, to countries putting the threat of nuclear weapons on the table at the beginning of the fight. And this requires a new set of systems and structures to deal with, one of which for Southeast Asia is ensuring that the region as a whole is effectively nuclear free. Now comes the unpredictable. There are many unpredictable aspects to what ASEAN, to what Southeast Asia is proposing. On paper, the idea that there could be no use or movement of nuclear weapons in Southeast Asia sounds too good to be true. It sounds almost utopian. However, saying that, both China and Russia have signaled that they will be the first countries, nuclear countries, to sign the document from ASEAN once it's ready. So the idea does have life, but there is a lot of unpredictability around such a treaty. The biggest is whether nations remain part of such a treaty. What the world has seen after the Ukraine-Russia war is that countless defense treaties, countless alliance-based treaties and treaties between adversaries have effectively broken down. Most recently, Baltic nations and Nordic nations have begun to withdraw from a landmark treaty that governed the use of landmines, one of the biggest sources of destruction and chaos during the world wars of the 20th century. Now, these same countries that were very much against landmines are now seeking to double down on them. So will a nuclear treaty that bans the use and movement of nuclear weapons in Southeast Asia remain intact, even if China, Russia, and the US sign it today? In the rapidly changing climate of geopolitics, will those nations remain signatories tomorrow? Second is whether a country in Southeast Asia itself decides to become a nuclear power, sensing the growing threats and concerns in the world. ASEAN has struggled to rise as a united force. The only area where ASEAN has been on the same page has been the territorial disputes with China. On practically every other front, whether it's sustainability, whether it's trade, connectivity, economic growth, development, even transcending historical challenges and tensions, ASEAN has not been able to resolve those very systematic issues. This same situation means that if ASEAN is in a sense of paralysis and with the conditions of paralysis, will an ASEAN member, will a country in Southeast Asia feel that it needs to take security and defense into its own hands? And the most important and powerful way it can do this is through nuclear weapons. The world has already seen other nations open up to nuclear weapons. South Korea wants nuclear weapons returned to the continent. Countries in Europe like Poland have opened up to hosting American nuclear weapons. And since the Ukraine war began, Belarus is now hosting Russian nuclear weapons. So there is a new game of nuclear chess underway. Nuclear proliferation is in full swing. And just because it's so far been limited to Europe or North Asia doesn't mean that tomorrow it won't also expand into Southeast Asia. Alongside all this is the big question of North Korea. Even if China signs, if Russia signs, what about North Korea? Will North Korea pledge not to use or move nuclear weapons in Southeast Asia? Most likely, the answer will be no. And this means that if countries like North Korea or Pakistan or others in the future refuse to sign it, then the more stable nuclear powers, be it the US, be it parts of the West, be it India, may refuse to sign the treaty too. So the Southeast Asian goal of having a nuclear-free zone may struggle to convince other nations who view nuclear weapons as their main way of deterring against their adversaries. And lastly is a big question of whether other regions of the world decide to mimic what ASEAN is proposing and what this means for the United Nations. Major global treaties have always been discussed, designed, and inked within the forums of the UN. Now ASEAN, a regional bloc, is trying to push forward these global historic ideas outside of the UN forums through their own unilateral efforts. If ASEAN is successful, then once again it casts a gray shadow on global institutions like the United Nations. What is their role? What is their relevance in the 21st century? And if ASEAN is successful, then what's to stop other regional blocs, other blocs and groups of governments from doing the same, causing the UN to watch from the sidelines? I hope you resonated with this episode of Predictable versus Unpredictable. Leave your comments below and talk soon.